Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 20th of June 2025. Just to remind people, beautiful mugs are available. Look at that. It's a NAFO patch mug, an ATP Geopolitics NAFO patch mug. Double patch. Amazing. Anyway, and as I said the other day, it does make tea taste 42% better. Yeah, true. Absolutely true. Amazing. Anyway, be quiet, Pierce. Let's get on with it. Okay, Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below, alongside links to get yourself a mug. 1,090 personnel is a pretty standard number for. It sounds horrible saying standard number. These are people dying and being maimed. But that is the nature of war. 1,090 personnel is about where we've seen it. 3 tanks and 7 AFVs likewise. 46 artillery systems is pretty decent. That's above twice the daily average. That's been fluctuating somewhat. Yesterday was a very heavy day in that category, and today's pretty decent. 1 multiple launch rocket system, a single anti-aircraft warfare system, so it's good to have one of those back on the list. 81 vehicles and fuel tanks, which is below 100. That usually signifies a fairly quiet day these days, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So fairly low compared to, I guess, over the winter period. We are probably seeing a lot more motorcycle attacks, and in fact, there's a lot of footage out there. As you can see from my tabs, I've got quite a few tabs. There is a lot of footage concerning strikes, drone strikes, and all sorts of stuff. There's a whole video on UGVs getting blown up that I've just seen from Magyar's birds. There's all sorts of motorbike activity. There's one I've just seen of 2 Russian motorcyclists traveling in opposite directions and just driving into each other, stuff like that. I did a breaking news piece yesterday, or just a random extra video with this guy, Andriy, the ambassador to the UK. Anytime he's interviewed, usually in the UK, it's just cringe because he is so overtly propagandistic. This was Christian Amanpour from CNN interviewing him, and he let slip that they are recruiting 50 to 60,000 people a month for replacement and posting and this and that. In other words, and he also said they have an army of sort of 600,000, which is actually less than what Putin had previously claimed, which means that even though they are recruiting at 50 to 60,000 a month, their armed forces actually got smaller, which means he's essentially admitting to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for Russian losses. So that was quite a slip yesterday. Yeah, it depends how you interpret his claims and whether 50 to 60,000 has been a long-term thing, etc., etc. But it has been picked up by a number of media outlets. Here, Kyiv Independent says senior Russian official inadvertently confirmed the staggering troop losses incurred by Moscow's forces during its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That's Kyiv Independent. Kyiv Insider, it says blundering through a CNN interview. Russian official inadvertently confirms that Russia's casualties are as high as Ukraine says they are. So that happened yesterday. There was another POW swap yesterday. As previously, Ukraine is not giving details of the exact numbers revealed or exchanged in today's prisoner swap with Russia, says Tim White. But the main thing is these guys are home and can get proper treatment, have proper meals. A little bit more on that in a second. Now, these were, it appears, ill POWs again. That's happened previously. There was 4 days in a row where POWs were swapped over the last week, and at least one of those days included a swap like this where each defender has serious medical diagnoses and illnesses. Many defenders were captured during the defense of Mariupol. The oldest released defender is 63. Now, that sounds like the one from the other day, but this was reported yesterday as well. So I don't know if this is just repeating the same news or they've had another day of prisoner swaps yesterday. One of the Ukrainian defenders who returned home is celebrating his 45th birthday. Today, Ukrainian Ombudsman Dmytro Lubinets shared. So this was shared all round yesterday, but it does look like a similar set of images from days before. Then we hear this. So This is coming from Deputy Justice Minister in Ukraine, Pikolov, who said some Russian prisoners are refusing to be exchanged. I've wondered about this. In fact, I reported on something like this, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, year and a half, when a similar, there were similar sorts of claims that actually, that we're doing all right here, thank you very much. Don't want to go back because chances are they're going to be sent onto the front lines almost straight away. And in fact, that was a claim that we saw about a month ago where they were just being turned around and sent back to the front lines. First of all, it is a comment here, the statement here. First of all, this concerns mercenaries who are not citizens of Russia. They said that they have 3 meals a day here, paid work, medical support, but at home there is none of that. So for those who have been forced into or duped into or have gone into fighting for Russia who are not Russian citizens, these foreign mercenaries, then actually life is better in the Ukrainian prison than it would be for them in Russia. Now, Chris Wiki has a thread here. It's not a massive thread, I don't think. So we're going to go through this. Russian army is sending a one-armed and one-legged soldiers into assaults, according to a wounded Chechen soldier who's been assigned to the so-called crippled battalion. He says that the men's fitness status is systematically being falsified. Remember, there was this this picture from some time ago that kind of indicated that this is something that happens. In a video appeal for help addressed to Chechny's dictator Ramzan Kadyrov, a soldier named Suleiman Husenovich Borshigov identifies himself as a member of the 383rd Motorized Rifle Regiment based in Voronezh. He says, quote, "There are sick people among us who are registered as healthy. There are even one-armed and one-legged people among us. They forged all our documents, registered us as completely healthy. They threw us into an assault squad, and now they are sending us to slaughter." Borshigov said that although he is assigned to a unit for the recovering wounded, quote, "they won't let me get treatment. He was injured in an assault in which almost every attacker died. Quote, about 90 people were killed among us. There were 6 to 7 of us who survived. Now they are throwing us back into the thick of things. This is the kind of lawlessness they are doing to us here." Borshigov blames the regiment's commander, an officer named Salikov, and its political officer. He appeals to Kadyrov to intervene. Quote, "I have a request for our leader. You save your Chechen. At least transfer me to your regiment. But by all means, get me out of here. These are the enemies of Allah. These people do not care about the country at all. They are simply traitors to this country," starting with Salikov. Borshigov's description of falsification of medical records is consistent with what Russian military doctors have said. The wounded are reportedly being rushed back into action to meet quotas. One doctor who deserted from the army has testified that she was ordered to rate as fit, even men who had lost limbs or eyes. The prevailing attitude appears to be if they can hold a rifle, they can fight. And again, all of this goes into, you feed it into your evaluation of what's going on in a war. And yes, it seems like these meat assaults are continuing, that the Russians are throwing people at the problem being they need to take land and they need to do it quickly. And this indicates that they are in need of fit and healthy men to the degree they are unable to get them. And so they are forced to do stuff like this. And yeah, while they are able to continue those gains along the front line, it comes at a huge cost. And it really does. Okay, Ukrainian drones destroyed and burned hangars with Russian military equipment in the village of Shishivka in Donetsk. So this is a site that we have seen before, but actually just a nice few vehicles shown in this one, all in the same place. So a successful strike there, or successful drone strikes there. And there is, as mentioned, quite a bit of footage. This is one that involves, like we saw the other day, a rare site that is quite a lot of mechanized equipment. So Mykolaiv Marines repelled a big mechanized assault of the enemy in Donbass, minus 14 enemy armored vehicles. The enemy's losses amounted to about 50 people, irretrievable and medical, as well as 6 units of motorized vehicles. So they lost quite a bit of equipment there, according to Max 25. And then we have, So I was trying not to show you inappropriate things. 55th Assault Brigade repelled the Russian motorized, my ears hurt now, Russian motorized infantry assault. Soldiers destroyed 4 motorcyclists and 3 more Russians. So there are plenty of videos of motorcycle attacks being repelled. Here's another one with a couple of motorcycles in the Kharkiv region. Ukraine's border guard, the Phoenix unit, destroyed 4 motorcycles, 2 infantry fighting vehicles, a vehicle, an MT-12 cannon, Mavic drone, and eliminated about 10 Russian soldiers. So, as I say, plenty of videos coming out at the moment. It's kind of a purple period for videos, and a few of them do have more extensive mechanized equipment losses, but a lot of them do detail lighter vehicles and particularly motorcycles. Now, the prevalence of drones has led there to be so many adaptations of Russian vehicles that we've seen, and probably Ukrainian vehicles as well, but some of the most outrageous ones have been Russian. This is a new one for me. A Russian T-62 based recovery vehicle was spotted with improvised anti-drone protection. Chunks of wire were strapped across the hull, showing yet another attempt to shield outdated hardware from FPV strikes. Like I've said before, though, as ridiculous as this looks, if it does a job, then it does a job. You know, you don't get awards, you don't kill people, or you don't not kill people if your vehicle looks ugly, right, or stupid. There are no marks for aesthetics, and it's all about functionality. And as silly as that is, it might well do a job, although it does make attacks, or it does make any kind of the prosecution of the war more costly and less efficient, because the amount of time and money that has to be spent on doing up stuff is not ideal, right? But I'm sure this is going on both sides. Here's a motorcycle equivalent of what we've just... Well, actually, no, it's not. This is not anti-drone, but the use of motorcycles in and of itself is now... is a result of the Russians having lost so many pieces of equipment. But then they have found the advantages of using motorcycles, and that is that they are, you know, quicker, less likely to trigger mines, although they still do, possibly easier to get away from drones, although they still do get hit by drones, but there's just a slight advantage. And here we have a motorcycle that has been loaded up, so you've got these sort of metal panniers whacked on the back. Look at all these drones that they're delivering, and shells as well, so or large mortar bombs. I think not sure. I think there might be shells. I don't know. Yes, but anyway, that is typical for the war these days, evidently. Russian upgraded motorcycles hauling small loads of supplies, ammo, and even FPV drones. Right, what else do we have? Oh, this video I thought was... So this is Dachi area of the Dnieper River, just opposite it's the Antonivsky Bridge here, just opposite Kherson City, just up the river a little bit. There have been these attacks. There's been quite a bit of activity. This video is doing the rounds. Quite a lot of people, sharing this, possibly because it has that vehicle upside down. But actually, you see quite a lot of destroyed equipment in this video. So it gives you a sense that, there's quite a bit of activity going on near Kherson still as well. And we have destroyed equipment, stuff off the road. It looks like that truck might have been pulling the howitzer. That's gone off the road. More stuff smoking up here. And the vehicle upside down in the river. So, more footage available to check out by checking the description below. Then we heard about this yesterday, and I'm not sure what went on here, whether it was anything funky or whether this was a case of pretty standard drone attacks from a long distance. But there were some rumours yesterday that Orenburg was receiving some attention, and it might have been some funky mission from the Ukrainians, a la Spiderweb, as in, maybe not so big, but thinking around the problem and coming up with innovations to take out particular targets. breaking news here, it says Visioner. An unusual situation is unfolding in Russia's Orenburg region. Local chats are buzzing with claims that Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance units have entered from Kazakhstan, while drones have reportedly been spotted near the locations of Russian strategic missile forces bases. So yeah, this was a claim that was going around yesterday. Then there were unconfirmed reports from Russia's Orenburg region. Local channels claim Ukrainian sabotage units may have crossed in from Kazakhstan. Drones were allegedly spotted near Russian strategic missile forces bases. Waiting for more info. We haven't really got too much information. There is a video here which it's worth looking at. So this is from, as mentioned, Orenburg, which is 1,000 kilometers plus from Ukraine, the Ukrainian border. Let's just look at this now.
Куда летит? Куда-то к нам?
Сюда, куда-то к нам летит, да. Прям над нами. Блядь, сюда что ли ебашит? Вон, блядь.
Куда летит?
Стоп. Вот, сейчас сюда, блядь, прилетит, сука. Уши.
Okay, so you got an explosion there. And what's worth noting is some people have said, look at the people running away here. They're all sort of in particular uniforms, maybe white scientists, like that guy wearing a white coat, with this kind of blue stuff underneath. The claim is that this could well be some kind of scientific installation, some kind of, I don't know, technical base. But anyway, there's just one explosion there, and I know nothing else about Orenburg and what happened there yesterday. So it could be that the Ukrainians mounted something funky, or that could just be a bit of flash in the pan, maybe a single explosion, nothing too much to report about. Who knows? Now, I'm going to highlight this again. Recently, there was a video, The Witch is a Butcher by Times Radio, that talked about female crews of air defense, female air defense crews, and also training for frontline operations and all sorts, and why they were motivated to do that. But I spoke, and I've said this so many times, I've spoken about the advantage, or I guess the value of drawing from, I dare say, unusual sources. I don't really mean that, but traditionally, your armed forces are made up of men of a certain age, right? And this war has taken its toll on the Ukrainian population. And so very early on, I was saying, right, you're going to start to need, people who are injured, women, people who are over the age of X, Y, and Z. But what you can do is put these people in positions that don't require peak physical fitness. And not to say that women aren't fit, but you know what I mean. If you don't want to put women on the front lines because you want them to be the primary carer for children, right? So men go off to war and the women stay at home looking after the children. Or if the women go off to war and the men go off to war, then who looks after the children? Okay, so what you can do is you can put women in local air defense units where they can still fulfill their job as a parent, but kind of do work for the armed forces during the day, or have the women working in the HR departments and get men working in the HR departments over to the front lines, or whatever. You get my point. Border guards, indeed it does appear that there are more and more women working as border guards, and maybe people who have retired from the armed forces, or whatever. There are ways of being able to fill the positions, but not rely on men of a certain age the entire time. And here we have another example of this. So the first female crew has been created in, I don't want to say, hey, I told you so, but I have this imposter syndrome thing where I like talking rubbish every day, but it's interesting when like a year later you're like, oh, they're doing that, oh, that's cool. The first female crew has been created in Ukraine to intercept Shahids, 427th Regiment of the Unmanned Systems Rarog. So we got, it looks like a female interceptor drone crew being trained up and utilized. So that's really cool. Okay, now we're going on to Shahid drones and distant strikes. 86 Shahids in Ukrainian airspace last night, 70 of them taken out, 16 getting through, which is coming up for sort of 20%. Not ideal as a interception rate. That is still fairly low considering where it was, but fewer drones being sent in. 34 shot down, 36 suppressed by electronic warfare. Then we go on to Odesa being the main focus of the Russian munitions. 2 killed, 39 injured in Russian attacks over Ukraine over the past day. Russian forces launched 86 Shahed-type attack drones and decoys against Ukraine overnight. Ukrainian air defenses reported, yeah, that's the same info, but some of this imagery is really quite striking, as it often is. Rescues among the injured as Russia targets again civilians in Odesa and Kharkiv. A collapsing structure wounded 3 firefighters in Odesa during intense operations to save residents. Incredible footage there, and the emergency services doing what they can to save people in Odesa there. And Russian attack on Odesa last night, says Anton Gerashenko. A residential building was completely on fire while rescuers were saving people. Parts of the building fell down. Another residential building caught fire after the attack. 600 people were evacuated. 5 more buildings and 3 vehicles were on fire. Incredible scenes from Odesa. And just here's some video of it. Scenes from Odesa over the past few hours are horrible, says Jay in Kyiv. Putin now has the US paralyzed, free to massacre Ukraine's civilian population. So he's obviously pretty angry about the state of affairs there. And then we have Tim White saying, while Trump dithers in the White House, Putin takes advantage in hitting a housing complex in Odesa called Orange, Apelsin. Do you believe in coincidences? Okay, so yeah, there are residential buildings being hit again by the Russians. If you've ever been to Odesa, you'll definitely know Hotel Nemo on the waterfront, an iconic upmarket place to say this is what tourists experienced and saw tonight. So there were some major, I think, iconic places hit in Odesa. I think the fountains, still no news of possible casualties in Odesa. As you can see, first moments during Russia's drone swarm attack were terrifying. As you can see, that burning inferno of a building, this person running away. A lot of people in Odesa already posting from inside apartment blocks ruined in tonight's strikes. Imagine this being your city, your street, your apartment building. Why isn't every decent human being doing everything they can to stop this murder night after night inflicted on Ukraine? This is Odesa. Tomorrow it may be Moldova, Latvia and Finland, etc., etc. Officials in Odesa say it's still too early to give details of casualties. The mayor is on site. Several tower blocks in the city centre have been hit. A university, Nemo Hotel and many cars were also damaged. Gas pipeline was also damaged in the city. So pictures coming out from Odesa. It was obviously a very tough night there for them. And yeah, sheer horror in Odesa again. 4-story apartment block is destroyed. Many others in the city hit. There we go. Some of these pictures we've already seen. And then, yeah, just a couple of drones heading for frontline areas as well in Donetsk region. So, okay, Odesa was definitely on in the crosshairs for Russia. And this is what Kalen says. So, Karen Robinson, who's there in Odesa, I was literally here hours ago. It's a beautiful fountains of the Odesa beach, and it's been hit by Russian terrorists. I can't describe how evil this is. So again, iconic landmarks being hit by the Russians there. Now, talking about strikes in general on Ukraine by the Russians, here is an interesting graph, and we've talked previously about how, Zelensky mentioned this yesterday, that the big difference that's taken place since Trump came into power in January the 20th is that the Russians are sending more drones into Ukraine. So there's been an uptick in Russian violence. Rather than solve the problem and bring about peace within 24 hours, the opposite has happened. Trump's presidency has ushered in a golden age for Russian drone attacks, says Jay in Kyiv, in Ukraine. Now often 300 to 400 in a single night, up from around 60. Putin understands that paralyzing all Western resistance is just about keeping Trump chasing the ball forever. It's really interesting that Trump has done his 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 week thing with Iran as well last night, saying that he'll decide whether he's going to strike or help to strike Iran within 2 weeks. And this is just him punting every difficult decision into the long grass, hoping something happens and then not having to deal with it. He is just too weak. I'm not saying he should attack Iran, but to just defer and not give an answer, it just shows what we've seen from him with regard to Ukraine. Israel is getting the Ukraine treatment there, which is, yeah, we'll give you a decision on that in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 week. Russia will strongly and precisely strike the largest cities of Ukraine sometime before June the 24th and 5th, before the NATO summit for psychological pressure, according to an expert from the National Institute for Strategic Studies, Yermak. Russia has established intensive production of drones. So that sort of a drone usage, these high numbers, as many as, well, okay, so what's interesting about this data as well is this looks like it's the drone sent, because what we normally have for the Ukrainian General Staff figures concerns the drones that have been intercepted. And of course, that doesn't tell you how many have been sent. So if we have a look at the Ukrainian General Staff figures here from Dell's stats that he updates every day, we have, what do we have? Drones, UAVs. So drones over here. And you can see that the numbers are getting steeper and steeper. The gradient is getting steeper here, which indicates more drones being sent. The trend line is going up, and you can see the interception rates. This is 2025. This area here is 2025. Wow. Just wow. So, yeah, I'm going to say that solve this problem within 24 hours. 24 hours came and went. We've had, 4 to 5 months, and there you go. The Russians have just upped the ante significantly. And then they are going to do it and some to correlate with the NATO summit that's taking place in just 4 days' time. That is a prediction. That's what they did, of course, for the G7, and they'll do it for NATO. I don't for a second doubt that. Now, Zelensky said that there was no military sense in the Kiev strike, so the one about 3 nights ago now, where Kiev, like for the G7 summit, where Kiev was absolutely hammered. And he says there was no military sense in the Kiev strike. It added absolutely nothing to Russian militarily. This is absolutely on point and needs to be said more and more. This is deliberate terror. The same thing that the Russian army under Putin did everywhere in Chechnya, from Chechnya to Syria. This is the only thing that Putin and his Russia know how to do really well. And this is exactly the plane that unites Russia with such regimes as are now in Iran or North Korea. Now Russia is trying to save the Iranian nuclear program. Otherwise, their public signals and private activity cannot be interpreted. When one of their accomplices loses the opportunity to export war, Russia suffers and tries to intervene. It's so cynical, and it proves again and again that aggressive regimes cannot be allowed to unite and become partners. One of the benefits of Iran getting a bit of a hammering from Israel, like militarily, is Russia's ability to be supported by Iran. Now, the Kiev Insider reported, and this was actually a couple of days ago, 16th now, so 4 days ago now, but I missed this as an official kind of piece in their publication. But Ukraine confirms the US is now protecting Putin's oil assets. I did kind of report the general idea, but I want to go to the original source here. This is Zelensky initially said it happened right after Putin's conversation with Trump, after the Americans asked us not to strike Russian energy facilities. So that's Zelensky saying that, and I missed that official statement from Zelensky. So Ukraine has been told by the Americans not to strike Russia's energy facilities. He described the timing of the Russian assault as a spit in the face to global efforts aimed at ending the war. Some allies, so this is hours later, the Ukraine's first deputy prime minister, Yulia Sviridenko, reinforced the message in a statement of her own. Some allies have asked us not to strike Russian energy infrastructure, even as Russia wages all-out war on ours, targeting power plants, oil and gas infrastructure, hydroelectric dams, every form of energy we rely on. So this is the Ukrainians officially saying, one, Russia is striking our energy infrastructure. Two, we've been told by the Americans not to strike theirs. How is this fair? The United States are trying to protect Putin's oil assets, is how the Kiev insider interprets that data. And you can't blame them. So last night, what happened in Russia? Not much as far as I can work out, or at least there's not a lot of data coming out. At least 5 explosions thundered over Voronezh. Preliminarily, their air defense has shot down air targets approaching the local oil refinery. So it could be that Ukraine is striking something near the oil refinery, or they could be just fed up with what America keeps telling them, and they might be trying to hit the oil refinery. Have no idea. Now, the Oriol region last night, this was actually much earlier in the evening, 9:43 my time, so about 11:43 their time. Unknown target, 600 kilometers an hour, was thundering towards Lipetsk in the Tula region, according to this Russian source. So a rather quick drone. According to updated information, a drone missile is flying to the rear through the Oriol region. Increased attention. Who knows what happened? Who knows what the outcomes were there? We know that in Crimea, a military base was hit by a drone at Bakhchisarai, something like that. So the Ukrainian drones have been active over Crimea, but don't know much else. This was caught on camera a little bit last night. Some flames going off there, but this is what it looks like today. Have no idea of the damage there, really. Okay, now onto other bits and pieces. Unsurprisingly, the UN has found that the Russian troops have raped and tortured children in Ukraine. That's a UN panel saying that, and yet we have this dithering in whether we support Ukraine, and there's both sidesism. I'm so sick of the both sidesism of the Trump administration, of Trump himself. He keeps saying, well, they're both as bad as each other, they're both doing this, both. Anytime he gets to the opportunity to criticize Putin, he doesn't. And he throws in Ukraine might get sanctioned as well, because Ukraine are not systematically doing this. Like, it's only the Russians. There's a massive asymmetry here, and it needs to be reflected in how we deal with Ukraine and Russia. I mean, the Europeans have got this right. We've got our rhetoric right, the Canadians as well, the Australians. But when it comes to the US, there's still this, and in fact, we're going to come on to another heinous example of this, where they are just completely unable to criticize the Russians, even given what the UN is finding, like systematic rape and torture of children. And apparently that's not enough. Russia, the country relentlessly bombing Ukraine, civilians in Ukraine, is now demanding that Israel immediately stop striking Iran's nuclear facilities. Moscow thinks it has a moral authority completely out of touch with the reality, said Snell reports. I spent ages trying to find the quote for this. The quote is outrageous. It's like literally what was said about, Iran, the US or Israel should not do X, Y, and Z. And of course, Russia have been doing X, Y, and Z in Ukraine for the last 3 years. It's just complete hypocrisy from the Russians. Now, oil could briefly hit $90 a barrel if the Strait of Hormuz closes. That's a little strait south of Iran that is very important for oil shipping throughout the world. Although it only goes into a sort of Gulf area. Is it the Gulf of Oman? There are a lot of ports there that are supplied by huge oil pipelines and whatever. And so if the Straits of Hormuz closes, as Iranians have threatened, and in fact there were ships there that were burning, that had hit each other, supposedly because the Iranians had spoofed the GPS and whatnot, then this spikes the price of oil, which then has an effect on the Russia-Ukraine war, because Russia then suddenly start getting lots more money for their oil and more rubles in their coffers. Brent crude could spike to $90 a barrel if the strait is shut, Citigroup analyst said. though they expect any disruption to be short-lived. And that's the one thing, is that these are quite volatile and doesn't mean that it's going to be lasting. The vital waterway sees about 20% of global oil trade, and a prolonged halt would be unlikely as efforts to reopen it would be swift. City estimates a closure could disrupt up to 3 million barrels a day for months. Brent is currently around $77 a barrel. Now, North Korea is to send 25,000 workers to Russia for drone production. Pyongyang may deploy up to 25,000 workers to a drone factory in Yelabuga to help boost Russia's drone output. NHK reports the goal: train North Koreans in manufacturing and operating drones like the Garan. At the same time, Ukraine's intelligence says that Russia is helping North Korea build strike drones, some of which may be shipped back for use in the war. Shoigu just visited North Korea again and confirmed 6,000 more North Korean workers are heading to Russia. So this is on top of the 6,000 that we know are going to, well, the claim is 1,000 are sappers, 5,000 are reconstruction workers, going to be working to rebuild stuff in Russia, 1,000 sappers to demine, but then others are claiming that that's just nonsense. They're actually 6,000 troops that they're going to send back into Russia to use against the Ukrainians. 25,000 workers here is about massively scaling up the production of these Shahed-style drones and giving them the requisite training to go and do that back in North Korea. And those drones that they build in North Korea could end up being back in Russia. In other words, North Korea is just a tool for the Russians here. And meanwhile, yesterday, incredible footage of a Su-24 protecting the oil fleet. It fired flares in front of a US warship in the Baltic, according to Russian news. Now, I haven't seen much talk about this elsewhere, but if this is true, this is absolutely incredible that you have a Russian jet doing this. I'm going to turn the... So I don't know if that is the case. I haven't done any imagery research on this to see whether this is old footage that has been recycled and it's not. It's actually a Su-24 going past its own ship or something like this. But the claim is that it has gone past the US warship that closely and fired off some warning flares. Yeah. It's if that's the case, then that is pretty brazen. Now, talking about Sukhoi, the Russian Sukhoi superjet manufacturer is to fire more than a quarter of its managers in Moscow. This is civilian aviation. United Aircraft Corporation is a manufacturer of both the SJ-100 and the MS-21. So I don't know if that's Sukhoi itself, but it's the Sukhoi superjet. I don't know if Sukhoi designs and then other people then manufacture. But nonetheless, real problems in the aviation industry. And some are saying, as Prune here is, that this could well be connected to the budget reductions of the spending reductions up to 20% to aviation development, but also to industry as well. So the funding coming from the Russian government to science and industry was, and I reported on this, was slashed due to raw materials budget revenues being slashed. So they're not getting money in for hydrocarbons and coal and whatnot. And so they're slashing budgets left, right and centre. And then you see stuff like this happening with the aviation industry. And then you're thinking, this is not going to be helping your economy, is it? Your economy is going to be struggling. So let's just get some more insight onto the Russian economy. I think another panel here, or might be the same panel I reported on at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, the resources or exhibition, whatever it's called, the resources that had enabled the Russian economy to grow for 2 years under conditions of war and sanctions have been exhausted, said the governor of the Bank of Russia, Elvira Nabiulina. Quote, "We have experienced relatively high growth over the past 2 years because we were able to tap into unused resources and labour. The reserves have largely been used up. Many companies are now facing a labour shortage. We had financial resources accumulated in the National Wealth Fund, which have been directed toward investment. We had capital reserves in the banking system, which served as a foundation for accelerating lending. But many of these resources have indeed been depleted. She said at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Capacity utilization at enterprises has exceeded 80%, according to Rosstat, setting a record in modern history. Anton Koroshenko continues, the national wealth fund's liquid assets have decreased threefold since the start of the war, down to $35.6 billion. That's a fraction of what it should be, right? So they've got $35.6 billion liquid. Like, that's the cash that they can draw from in the sovereign wealth fund. Once that goes, they've got nothing left in the tank, really, for the future. And then if they're involved in a war against, say, NATO or something like that, this is why I say that Russia are in a lot of trouble. And had it been that Trump on January the 20th came in and just hammered them with sanctions, then they would have capitulated, I'm sure, by now. Experts at Dnieper have warned that this reserve could be fully depleted by 2026. So in other words, the sovereign wealth fund could be zero over the next 6 to 7 months. Meanwhile, this has appeared in Russian media. Now, we know that during the spat with Musk and the spat between Musk and Trump recently, where Musk was kind of like kicked out, said some things on Twitter, then they didn't quite kiss and make up. Musk wanted to, but Trump hasn't actually done that. Russia apparently offered Musk asylum in Moscow, in Russia. And of course, that's a great sort of easy bit of a PR win. But apparently, according to Davankov, who is the deputy for the Duma, the deputy for the parliament, he has said that Musk asked for asylum in Russia. So Musk applied for asylum in Russia. That is being reported in some media outlets in Russia. Of course, take it with a pinch of salt, but that's incredible if true. And it shows you exactly who butters Musk's bread. Right. Then there was a piece in Politico that was an assassination piece of Andriy Yermak. Andriy Yermak is thought to be the most powerful person in the Ukrainian government. He's head of the presidential office. He could well be sort of the person really behind the president. Despite political divisions in Washington, there is a rare consensus. Andriy Yermak has fed up everyone, especially the Trump administration, according to Politico. Many in Washington view Yermak as ill-informed about US policy, harsh, overly demanding, and unable to navigate the Washington establishment. Some fear he is misrepresenting the US's position to Ukraine's leadership, calling him a bipartisan irritant. His visits often lack a clear agenda, leaving interlocutors wondering, we don't know why he's here. One interlocutor described Yermak as acting as if Ukraine were at the center of the world, which has already affected relations with the United States. His behavior can only inflame voices in the Republican Party and Trump allies who seek the US support for Ukraine, seek to end US support for Ukraine. So, this is difficult because, like, as someone says there, Ukraine is the center of the world for Ukrainians, right? So that's going to be fairly obvious. And it's such a tough political environment in the US that he's going to be rubbing some people up the wrong way because he's going to be trying his damnedest. It's so difficult to, do you walk on eggshells or do you stand up and be firm with the United States? And so there'll be many in the United States government thinking, well, you should walk on eggshells and you should acquiesce to us and you should blah, blah, blah. And others who like frustrated in the US pulling all the strings, and there needs to be a bit of backbone and spine, and Andriy Yermak might well have that, but on the other hand, he might also be sort of bulldozing his way into American politics in a way that is counterproductive. And so, and you never know with assassination jobs in the media like this, whether, this is something that's been asked for by, I don't know, a political group in the US or whatever. Yeah, what is the motivation for writing this? Is it just a completely true and factual representation of what Andriy Yermak is like? Or is this designed to undermine the Ukrainian government and one of the main people in it? So, I have no idea, but, all of these ideas swirl around in my head. But certainly Andriy Yermak getting a bit of a pasting there in the Politico article. Tim White says, is it the end for Yermak? Politico today launches a scathing attack on Zelensky's much derided chief of staff. The news site said he could jeopardize aid for Ukraine there. We'll have to wait and see. And then last thing here, Zelensky has appointed Brigadier General Shapovalov as the new ground forces chief. So if you remember, Drapachi was in charge, and then there was that strike on a training center up in Sumy that he took responsibility for and said, I'm going to hand my resignation in. It wasn't accepted by Zelensky in its entirety, and he got moved basically back to his original position, controlling, I forget which unit it is. And now you got someone else coming in. He was really popular, Drapachi, and it was refreshing to see someone say, look, although he wasn't like directly responsible for the strike in Sumy, it's like, it happened on my watch. I should be stopping stuff like this happening. And, I'm responsible for all the decision making under me, and blah, blah, blah. So he took corporate responsibility there, which is refreshing. But they need people who are decent like Drapachi. So he's gone back to doing his kind of more operational stuff with his unit. And you've got Shapovalov, who's come in, who's a career officer, graduated from the Military Institute of Tank Troops in Kharkiv, and later studied at National Defense University of Ukraine. I don't know anything about him particularly other than that. Okay, that's enough from me. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. And now my tea's cold, but still 42% better than other cold tea I've had in other mugs. It's a fact.